So we're 4 days from an election in this province. And I have to say, I was at Queen's Park for 12 years in political life, 4 elections. And out of my office, I'm quite honored to say and proud that we passed more private members' bills than anybody in Ontario's history, and more LGBTQ2S bills than anybody in Canada's history. Proud of that, 4 elections later. And really it was time to leave, and I'm happy that I did. This is the best job in the world, no doubt. But of course, what I'm being asked now when I'm on radio panels, I know Steve Paikin's, mark my words, on Thursday night he's going to ask me this: don't you wish you had run this time? Because you could have been a cabinet minister. Wow. And my answer every time I'm asked that question is, I am already a minister, and I do not need another cabinet. The question before us, of course, is, what would the source of all love, that which we call God, what would God have us do on Thursday? Not just on Thursday, of course. What would God have us do about our political reality? And I was thinking that it's kind of 10 points, I kind of jotted them down, and I realized there were 10. It's a magical number, of course, 10 commandments. So what would satisfy Christians in any government, anywhere, at any time in history? And by Christians, I'm not talking about the Christian right, because the Christian right is neither. Just remember that. It's neither Christian nor right. It is actually an offshoot of republicanism south of the border and has very, very little, if anything, to do with Jesus' teachings. So when we talk about the polis, and the question is, when can we rest? Because you know, at Trinity-St. Paul's, justice is our middle name. This is when we can rest. Number 1. When no child in the world goes hungry. Number 2, when we are living with renewables and when we are healing rather than harming our earth. Number 3, when everyone is well housed. Number 4, when pharma, dental, healthcare, education at all levels is available and accessible for everyone. And remember, I'm not just talking about Ontario. 5, when racism, homo, bi, and transphobia, ableism, and misogyny are eliminated. 6, when our First Nations and Aboriginal citizens everywhere receive true justice. 7, when we all have work, and that work is not just busy work, it's meaningful work that makes a difference in our world. 8, when our seniors live in dignity and are surrounded by love. 9, when all our planet's wealth is shared. And 10, when we have put an absolute end to war and even the threat of war. And why, as Christians, do we say that we cannot rest until all of that list is complete? It's not because we're utopians. It's because we're realists. It's because only when that list is complete is there true hope for all of humankind. And that list hasn't changed for thousands of years. It hasn't changed. It's the same list that Jesus worked with. And we should think about our own history in this country as Christians. Just think about people like Louis Riel, Agnes MacPhail, J.S. Wordsworth, Tommy Douglas, Ben Smiley, Christians all, Canadians. They originated the social gospel movement. It started here. And then it was exported to our neighbors to the south, called liberation theology, but it started here, called prairie populism. It was back when populism was a good thing. Prairie populism, it started here, and it started with us, and it was really the foundation, not only of the United Church of Canada, but of Canada, and what we know is social justice in this country. In that list, you have a Roman Catholic, you have a Methodist, you have a United Churcher, you have a Baptist, and you have a Christian agnostic. Christians all. If we look at Jesus and his interactions with the Pharisees in this chapter, we see exactly what our interaction should be with the state. Whoever the state is, and with the church, whatever the church is, because they were both in his day. So the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Zealots, the Essenes, they were both political and religious parties, really both. And so when he railed against the Pharisees, first of all, lest we read anything anti-Semitic out of this, Jesus was a Jew, they were all Jews. And in fact, Paul was a Pharisee. And in fact, it's thought that the author of John was an Essene. So there were members of Christ's following that were part of all of those groups. And when he railed against them, he was really railing against his own, in a sense. His own, that had gone off track, had made some mistakes. And make no mistake, Jesus was profoundly political. Profoundly political. In this passage, what is he doing? This passage, he is saying, it's far more important to feed people and to heal people than to follow the law. Wow. Them's revolutionary words. And he also says a very political statement, and he says it throughout the Gospels. He says, the only true economic indicator for people of faith, the only one that counts ever, is the health and the well-being of all of our children. Nothing else, he says, matters. That's the true indicator. You know, there's a great spiritual truth, and it is this one. We become what we hate. So people of faith, Christians included, their reaction to politics should always be one of love. And that is to our politicians as well, whatever party they represent. Now remember, we don't have to like them. We just have to love them. That's an important distinction. But unless we learn to speak across divides, unless we learn to do what Jesus is doing in this passage, which is to educate those who feel differently than we do, then we're never going to move forward to fulfill the list of 10. We're not. Because, you know, nobody wants a one-party state, I hope. So we have to speak to each other, and we have to keep the conversation going, no matter who's in government. We have to keep their feet not only to the fire, but to keep in dialogue. Never, ever more important than now. And I would say our two greatest weapons as social justice warriors, and that is who we are. And this is going to freak you out. Number one is prayer, and number two is faith. And I can see prayer, going to get us all evangelical on us. Ugh. You know, it was interesting to me that the students in the US and the reaction to the school shooting said, we don't need your prayers, because that's a standard response from all politicians and governments. Oh, we'll pray for you. And they said, hold your prayer, we want gun reform. And they were right, of course. And on the Christian right, they always say, you don't need gun reform, you just need prayer. I think both are a misunderstanding of what prayer is. Prayer is faith expressed. It's faith spoken, if only silently to ourselves. Prayer is faith expressed. So, some examples of prayer. The Berrigan brothers getting arrested for denouncing the militarism in the States, that was a prayer. Martin Luther King Jr., when he spoke, all his speaking, that was a prayer. When Tommy and J.S. and Louis and Ben and Agnes insisted people's hell should not have a dollar amount attached to it, that was prayer. That was faith expressed in the public sphere. That's what it was. When we in the United Church in 2001, before the law changed, stretched the law to legalize same-sex marriage, we kind of broke the law. That was a prayer. That was a prayer. And when we apologized to First Nations back in 1986 for the horror of colonization, and we backed it up with money, that was prayer. Powerful, powerful prayer. And when we in this congregation set the gold standard for ethical investing and getting away from fossil fuels, that is prayer. That is faith expressed. That's who we are. And that is what we're saying to the divine. To the source of all love, we're saying, yes, we get it, and that's why we can do this. One of the trips I did as a politician was to Sweden. And when you think about that list of 10, Sweden's no utopia, don't get me wrong, but they, plus about another 20 countries, have free post-secondary tuition. They have free childcare, free pharmacare, free dental care. They have 85% unionization rate. In fact, McDonald's is unionized there. And there's 9 million people in Sweden. Their tax base supports all that. And for those of you who don't want to say goodbye to capitalism, they are a capitalist country. We can all name Swedish companies. IKEA, H&M, Sony Ericsson, Volvo, it goes on. When I was there, I got sick, and I went to their healthcare clinic. It was fine, kind of like here. But the difference was that I went from the healthcare clinic, had bronchitis, into the pharmaceutical dispensary, and it looked like IKEA. It did. It was wild. All the packaging looked just like IKEA, and it was all the same. It was all generic. Interesting. And somehow they make it work. They built 100,000 new units of housing a year for 10 years in Sweden. They called it the 100,000 year project. They don't have poverty in Sweden, not like here, not like the States for sure. And they're not alone in that. When we were there, the students, the post-secondary students, were on strike because they weren't being paid enough to go to university. Wow, think about it. And they're not alone in that. Some 22 countries have free post-secondary education in Europe. So we don't have to get all 10 on that list, but we can chip away at it, can't we? So faith, too, of course, is something we do in public. We can pray and we can meditate, and we should. We can do yoga, and it's a good thing to do. But at some point in our lives, we have to walk out the door, and we have to speak truth to power. And that is what faith looks like. Because the mark of faith in the public sphere is courage. It is courage. It is a belief in that world where all 10 of those necessities are made real. We can feel it. Arundhati Roy says, if we listen we can almost hear her breathing. We can see it, we understand what it can look like, and we, people of faith, can make it so. So I don't know about you, but whatever happens on Thursday, and you kind of know where my proclivities lie, but whatever happens on Thursday, we have our work cut out for us, because we need to be there, and we need to be holding our representatives to that standard of 10. We need to accept nothing less, nothing less. And we need to work across the divides to make it so. Because I can tell you, if Doug Ford gets elected, I'm going to be in Christine Elliott's office within hours. We have to work to make it so. And if Andrea gets elected, I'm going to be in a lot of offices within an hour. Prayer, faith, courage, love. Whoever is elected, this church will be a sanctuary for all. And this church will be a place of faith and prayer in the public sphere. Rock on, T.S. Piers, and amen.